Hello, everyone. Welcome back. And we were just in a webinar with the Climate Coalition, and now we're moving on to a very interesting webinar organized by Obesu, which is one of the 5 lead partners of the ELNE. So we're very happy to have you here. And now I will give the floor to Gilda to kick off this webinar. Gilda, go ahead.
Thanks so much, Valentina, for the introduction, and welcome everyone. Good afternoon. This webinar is organized by Obesu in partnership with ActionAid Italy and UDS, Unione degli Studenti. I am Gilda Isenia, and I will be your moderator for today's session. Joining me for the session are also Corinne Reyer from ActionAid Italy and Nive Ross from Unione degli Studenti. Hi, Nive and Corinne, and thanks so much for being here with me today. And thank you all, in fact, for coming. Today is the last day of this ELNE webinar week, and the overarching theme for the sessions taking place on Friday is the future of education. Now, I will not take too much time away from our very important speakers, but I just wanted to say, from the side of Obesu, as the representatives of school students across Europe, we believe that the first thing that the future of education needs is more and better student participation. So this is why we're here today. Today's webinar is all about how civil society, research institutions, and student union together can work to achieve this aim. Now, let us look a second together at the agenda. Yes, so first of all, we're going to start with a little bit of an interactive activity, a quiz on student unions. How much do you know about student representation? And then Corinne will set the scene, tell us a little bit about the research that ActionAid conducted together with Ipsos on student participation and the state of student representation in Italy, as well as the connection with social inequalities. And finally, Nive will discuss and show us a bit of the highlights of the Possiamo Tutto campaign, We Can Do Everything campaign, and the various ways that students have mobilized on the ground to amplify their demands. Then we will have a tiny bit of time also in the end for questions and a wrap-up. So without further ado, if everything is ready on the technical side, maybe we can launch the poll. Yes. So the first question is, were you ever active in a student union? Okay. This is more of a question to see a bit who's in the audience. I see we have some former. Okay, we have a few former student union members. Very good. So maybe the rest of this quiz will be easy for you. We could move on maybe already to the next question. Yeah. So what is a student union? It's A, an elected body of students in a given school, or B, an elected body of students in a given country, or C, a student-led organization active at various levels. Okay, so some people got it right. The majority, I would say, yes. So a student union is a student-led organization active at various levels. There is a side that concerns more the representation of student interests, and a side that is more about maybe providing services or leisure activities. While when we're talking about an elected body of students in a given school, we're probably talking about a school board or a student council when it's the case of a given country, but denominations tend to vary quite a bit across the EU, for example. Ooh, I think I spoiled that one a little bit. What is the main goal of a student union? To represent students' interests and defend their rights, to support students throughout their academic career, or to organize parties and other leisure activities? Well, this one maybe was a bit easy. I spoiled it. But yeah, that's normally sometimes in universities we call those who support students throughout their academic career student services. But then it is true that the student unions indirectly, they also aim to clearly support students in their academic career, and we will also see a little bit how much that works. Moving on to maybe the last of the questions. So when is it that we see the first forms of student organizing? 1800s, 1900s, or 1950s? Actually, the first forms of student organizing date back as far as the 1820s to be exact, just a few decades after the first workers' union. So you can really see there the connection. And of course, the first ones were active at higher education level. That was at the time higher education. Then let's say that is a bit of the precedent in a way for secondary school student union. So that's where we sort of date back our legacy a little bit. Very nice. Last question. Student unions are funded through A, crowdfunding and students' contribution, B, institutions, governments, and local authorities, or C, political parties. There is also option D, which is any of the above. Yeah, so it's really, I think the results kind of exemplify this, but it's the correct answer would be any of the above. But then, of course, this varies very much across countries. There are some student unions that are founded through various different mechanisms, some that are founded only in one mechanisms. So, because of this, we say that any of the above, any or all of the above at the same time would be the correct answer. But of course, depending also on the nature and the size of the student union, some of them are crowdfunded, so founded through students' contributions. Some of them are partly financed by governments, institutions, local authorities. Others are more strictly connected to political parties. In Obesu, our member unions cannot be, by our statutes, our full members cannot be financed by political parties. Fun fact. But yeah, so I hope that this was a tiny bit educational for you as well. These are very interesting answers for us to look at. Sometimes we think that what we do is quite straightforward, but it's good to remember that from an outsider perspective, some things might not be so clear. So I hope you learned something with this. I think that we can move on to our first speaker, Corinne. Now, Corinne, you have conducted research with Ipsos on the topic of student representation, but also social inequalities. And so my question to kick off this presentation is, in what ways can student participation improve the fairness of education systems as a whole?
Thank you, Gilda. I will also share my screen. I have prepared a small presentation also to guide today's intervention during this webinar. And we will, during the presentation, I think, step by step, also, Gilda, answer your introductory question. So first of all, what was the assumption also for us to start working more and more on school participation and school representation? That schools are actually the first training ground for democracy. It's the first spaces besides family where children and youth learn to interact and to be together as a community. And thus for us, practicing critical and conscious citizenship is an individual, but also a collective political act in the broadest sense. Why do we work on students' participation also to counter educational inequalities? So first of all, let's just create a common vocabulary. So what are educational inequalities? It's objective and systematic inequalities in educational process outcomes among social categories defined by determined characteristics, such as, for example, the origin, gender, race, socioeconomic background, and many other characteristics that you can see also in the wheel of privilege and power in the image. For us, it is important and fundamental to apply an intersectional lens in order to understand how inequalities impact young people and students in terms of equal access, opportunities, and outcomes. One very important element is also to consider the aspect of intergenerational transmission of inequalities and the problem of their, let's say, crystallization within the educational system. But as ActionAid, we have chosen to talk about educational inequalities and not, for example, educational poverty, because we think that it's not just the economic aspect influencing educational outcomes and opportunities, but it can be many different characteristics and aspects that overlap and intersect among them. There are different factors, both within and without the school, that can reduce vulnerabilities. For example, the forms and organization of teaching, so the quality of learning environments, but also the fact of creating a safe space where everyone feels entitled to speak out their opinion, the fact of having good relationships with the local community surrounding the school. For example, another factor inside the school is promoting the well-being and the mental health of all those who are part of the school community and of the learning community. But also, and you see it in the last point, students' participation and in governance and their effective leadership. Also, we see also factors outside the school that contribute to reducing vulnerability, and especially in this case, I want to underline the importance of the collaboration among different stakeholders, and especially also the co-design of interventional practices and educational practices and educational interventions and programs, so that all stakeholders can bring their expertise, but also that the school is not alone, does not feel alone in solving all the big problems that we know are on a daily basis. I will try to move the screen. Yeah, here we go. So why does participation fight educational inequalities? According to Lieke in 2010, but also to UNICEF in 2017, among 20% of the responsibility for variability in school engagement and school dropout can be attributed to the school's democratic culture. So, for example, also the opportunity of including students in decision-making processes. This was also one of the key findings from all our researches that we have done and are at the basis of the Possiamo Tutto campaign. Nive will tell us something more about afterwards. Just before going on also the results of our survey, I just wanted to focus on two models which guide us in all our interventions, educational interventions. So one is the Landi model for child and youth participation, which has identified 4 core dimensions for guaranteeing a youth-led participatory process, which are voice, according to age and personal attitudes of those involved; space, so the fact of having space, which needs to be safe, inclusive, and respectful; the fact of identifying an audience and having an audience whom to address our requests, so the importance of defining who the decision makers are, but also the importance of for youth and children to have actual influence. So not just to be listened to, but also to have a word in all those decisions that somehow regard them, regard their life and regard their future. Another very interesting model that we wanted to share with you, but maybe you all know it, is the ladder of participation, which Roger Hart has elaborated in 1992. And as you see, it's he uses this metaphor of the ladder to identify 8 different steps of participation. The first 3 rungs are defined as non-participation. So these are approaches which do not guarantee an actual and non-manipulated participation of young people. Only starting from rung 4, we can see how progressively the quality of participation and of youth leadership enhances until rung 8, where initiatives are started by young people and the decisions are shared with adults. And this is a very, very interesting and useful tool. I will now not go in depth with respect to the case study, but maybe we'll have the chance to share also the slides with you afterwards. But it's also a tool that we have started using to help us reflect on how participatory all our interventions actually are, because the risk of manipulation, decoration, and tokenism is always around the corner. So this can be a very also interesting monitoring and evaluation tool for all our intervention. But let's now go more in depth with respect to this research, the survey that we have conducted together with Ipsos and in collaboration with Unione degli Studenti. We have interviewed approximately 800 students from high schools all over Italy through the CAVI methodology, so computer-assisted web interview. And we have had around 50% attending lyceums, 31% attending technical high school, and 19% attending professional high school. In general, this is a statistically relevant target. So we can definitely also take those data for statistically relevant. So we have asked them very different things. Today, we will focus just on some of them, which are more interesting also and key for our webinar today. So we have asked them, for example, how the state of the art of students' participation and representation was before and after the pandemic. And before the pandemic, we can see that, wait, I will go on. Here we go. Before the pandemic, we can see that even though the Italian legislation is quite advanced, also with respect to other European countries, it was not totally applied in all Italian schools because only, for example, in 20% of cases, class assemblies were held monthly. And actually, this is a right also determined by Italian law, that classes and also schools have the right to have one assembly per month. 50% of students also state that before the pandemic, school assemblies were held few times a year or never. 1 out of 10 does not even know. So this really makes us understand that there is a crisis of participation in Italy, and that one key element is that students do not actually know all the tools and instruments that they have available. One thing that I want to underline is that in Italy, in vocational training centers, which are not dependent from the national ministry, but are of regional competence, well, this is technicism, but the right to representation and participation is not guaranteed. So actually, we see a huge inequality also between different types of schools, where you have contexts where participation is actually practiced, or at least law gives all the instruments to practice it, and other contexts where there are no tools that can support students in making their voices heard and advocate for their rights. We have then asked them also how the situation has been after the start of the pandemic. The survey has been conducted in 2021, so we don't have a photography about what if the situation has gotten better over the last years, but there was definitely a problem with access to participation and representation tool for Italian students. So for example, approximately 40%, so 4 out of 10 classes did not hold any online assemblies, and no school assemblies were held in more than 40% of schools. This makes us understand that in a critical time like the COVID-19 pandemic, the possibility to make their voices heard got even lower for students. We have also asked them for their motivations for participating. Definitely, there is also an element of socialization and being with friends, but the most important element which has come up is the sense of responsibility and willingness to make one's voices heard. And this is especially for girls, because we see quite a gender difference in this. And this, I think, is something that we need to start from, because there is a huge rhetoric about those young people who are lazy, who are choosy, who do not really want to engage. But all our research, not just this survey, but really all different researches that we have conducted as ActionAid and also the experience on the field tell us the difference. It is more about the older generations not wanting to make space for youth. I don't know if you have this also in your countries, but in Italy, students can also organize self or co-management weeks in their schools. And there are also quite often school occupations, either for specific problems in the school, but also for broader social problems. And also, we have been asking them what they think about those kind of initiatives, which our minister himself defines as vandalic, and people who occupy schools, he just said that like 2 days ago, should not pass the year, according to our education minister, but only for 40%. And here I underline only because it means that another 60% thinks the contrary, think that it's an excuse to have fun. So we see that also this out-organization of students, this moment of self-organizing, are definitely key for fostering participation besides the structured tools and the recognized tools. It's like a bottom-up tools that really become key also in creating an active environment at school. Then we have also asked them about the role of the local community surrounding the school. So we see the school as a heart of the center of the community, but there are many different stakeholders and actors who can and should collaborate with school institutions. And for little under 60% of students, their school is inclusive, equipped with progressive teachers, and seriously preparing for future. And more or less the same percentage thinks that their school is strongly connected to the local community. And this is also for us a very interesting element, because we as ActionAid think that it is important that schools are not left alone, but that there is a network around schools. And I think that also students recognize the value of this. Then we have also asked them in general about youth-led activism, both inside and outside school, and in general, their political attitudes. So also, for example, how often they look for information, where they look for information, which public figure they have most trust in. And you can find it in the slide, but it was very interesting because among the most trustworthy public figures, we had the Pope. So this, I think, was quite interesting also for me. But what I wanted to underline here is that students know their battles. Young people know their battles and know what they need to fight for. And indeed, climate justice, feminism, LGBT rights, but also students' rights are the key battlefields for students today. Also recognizing the intersections among those battles. So here we find again the importance of an intersectional approach. Besides the survey, we have also conducted some focus groups, also to collect some more qualitative data, and definitely the importance of assemblies, but also of representation tools has come up from all the focus groups we have implemented, both because it's a moment of socialization and team building. Let's not forget that each school is a small community, but also those moments are fundamental to start tackling specific problems at class and at school level, and also to coordinate to address those issues together. Also to conclude, we have summed up the evidences from our researches and our experience on the field with respect to what students want, what students are asking and advocating for. Definitely to have their voices heard and take full advantage of the tools available to them, but also to create new ones. To build a vision of the school, starting for those who live it on a daily basis and are already making concrete proposals to solve the school's structural deficiencies, such as students, teachers, and not doing it in a closed room in the ministry, but really to interact with those stakeholders to create training on spaces and tools for student participation, both for teachers, because there is a problem with teacher awareness on participation, but also for students, and to do that especially through peer education. To enhance the bottom-up participatory tools, such as, for example, self-management weeks or students' week, we could define them, but also collective or joint commissions, which are not yet formally recognized. And last but not least, to increasingly affect teaching and organization of school life through the adoption of participatory teaching. So, for example, peer education, and to have safe spaces in which to discuss not only about learning subjects, but about school and society level issues and problems. And all those evidences have led us to start and to launch together with Unione degli Studenti the Possiamo Tutto campaign. And I will now leave the floor to Nive to tell us more in detail what this is about. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Corinne, for introducing the topic. I am Nive from UDS, and as you already heard, I will be talking about our campaign, Possiamo Tutto, that translated means we can everything. And again, first slide. And it was a campaign done together with ActionAid. It all started because we realized that as for right now in our country, but not only, because speaking with many other students from all of Europe and other students unions from all Europe, we ended up realizing that we are facing a crisis of participation and representation of the youth. The people who lead our countries rarely listen to the youth, and they don't include us in the decisions that regard us. So we daily face a situation in which all of our needs are not met just because our governments and our schools aren't open to a dialogue. To make an example, even though students make up for the vast majority of schools, they are in neat disparity in school councils, where between teachers and parents, they make up double number than we do. We are talking about 4 students representatives against 8, as you can see in the slides. Also, along the years, this role of students has lost power, and that's unfortunately in large part due to the fact that there is no training on students' rights or even on how to play a representative role. So we find ourselves without the tools to protect ourselves in schools against injustice, or even just to organize simple things in the places that we experience every day. Also, the student organizations aren't summoned regularly like they should by the Ministry of Education, so we don't have any spaces to express our opinions on important topics. Because of this, the general feeling is, and has been for a while, that we didn't have enough power or voice in the things that regard us. But we wanted to change that with this campaign. Because of all of this, the campaign Possiamo Tutto was born. Translated to English, that means we can do everything. A strong statement to say that we wouldn't be held back by the current situation, and also an exhortation to believe that by asking for our rights to speak about what concerns us, we can make a change in the school system. Talking about a little bit about the timeline of this campaign, it all started mainly in November 2022, but the first seeds of it were already implanted prior to it, because We already had a manifesto of public school, elaborated after various campaigns that culminated in the General States of Public School that saw the participation of thousands of students from all Italy. But because all of the already explained issues that we were facing, we decided to deepen one of the aspects of it, students' representation. It all started after a national strike that we did on the 18th of November 2022, that saw the slogan Ora decidiamo noi, or it's our time to decide, take place in all of the peninsula. And that day, we launched the National Assembly on students' representation, the National Assembly of Possiamo Tutto, where we talked about victories that we had already obtained and how to replicate them in other schools. And we also discussed about students' representation and participation in all of its ambits, like how it is connected with the transfeminist and the ecologist cause, or how it connects us to our cities and territories, or in how to create participation where there aren't any formal organs like students' councils, the places that Corinne explained earlier. Now wanted to show you one of the videos that we recorded during this assembly. Her name is Chiara, and she was the first student to manage to create the menstrual leave, to bring the menstrual leave in her school.
Sono Chiara Piazzini, ho 17 anni e studio in liceo artistico nelle Studenti di Ravenna. Nella mia scuola quest'anno ho fatto introdurre il congedo mestruale assieme agli altri rappresentanti dell'istituto, e per congedo mestruale si intende 2 giorni al mese che vengono concessi a tutte quelle persone che soffrono di dismenorrea, e di conseguenza hanno la possibilità di stare a casa 2 volte al mese senza che queste assenze poi vengano contate nel monte delle ore alla fine dell'anno. Penso che sia stato utile perché sicuramente in questo modo tutte le persone che soffrono durante il ciclo avranno la possibilità di stare a casa senza doversi preoccupare delle assenze o comunque dei giorni persi durante l'anno scolastico, e sicuramente si sentiranno anche più tranquille nello stare a casa senza aver paura di essere bocciate. Spero che l'esempio che abbiamo portato nella mia scuola e in tutte le altre che stanno seguendo le orme del liceo artistico possa ispirare la politica e far capire che comunque il congedo mestruale è una cosa di cui non solo le studentesse hanno bisogno, ma tutte le donne in generale che lavorano, perché comunque avere il ciclo e soffrire durante il ciclo è molto pesante. Io stesso soffro molto e diventa difficile stare concentrati, lavorare, di conseguenza per una donna sarebbe più facile poter stare a casa serenamente senza doversi costringere ad andare al lavoro anche se sta male.
And as you can see, this was one of the experiences that we wanted to bring at our National Assembly. And there were many more that ended up in our manifesto, because at the end of this assembly, we managed to formulate our idea of a reform of the students' representation system. And in fact, on the last day of the assembly, we did an action under the Ministry of Education to explain what had come out in the prior 2 days of discussions. And this reform was then drafted between the months of March and April, and then presented in its complete form. Months later, at our national Camp Riot Village that we keep every summer, we decided to replicate the February Assembly, but this time targeting everything that was left out in the first one. So it was way more specific on certain aspects, and also we did way more labs focused more on training. That we had Okay. After that, we had the opportunity to discuss our proposals and to challenge politicians and ask them for answers and to invest in our proposal inside some tables in a policy lab organized by ActionAid inside their festival of participation. Some parliamentarians and politicians participated to these tables, so we were able to directly confront them. In the end, all of this culminated in the International Student Strike that took place on the 17th of November, International Students' Day, where under the slogans of "Let's dismantle the merit-based schools" and "Change the school to change the system," that was our international slogan. We saw many strikes and mobilizations take place in Italy and all throughout Europe. And this was an ending point, but also a beginning for all new different types of fights that we wanted to engage in, and that brought us to where we are right now, talking about the points in our manifesto. Trust that hopefully the translated version will be able for you to read, so won't go too much into detail, also because some things are very specific to the Italian reality, and so sometimes not that understandable if you don't live the system that we live. But I want to talk a little bit about our main demands for this campaign. First of all, in manifesto, we classify two types of representation. The one that is done through formal organs that already exist in our legislation, like student councils, and the most spontaneous one that comes from a need of participation, and that can manifest itself through student collectives or student unions like ours, journals, and all of these modalities that create informal participation regarding the school life and the issues that we face in our territories. Some of our demands are the doubling of the number of students in school councils that, as I already said, are a neat minority, and joint committees in every school that basically is a board made of equal numbers of students and teachers that has the jurisdiction over orientation courses to work and higher level education, school trips, and generally all the decisions that, as for right now, are mainly took by and made by teachers. Then we would like training courses on representation tools for both teachers and students, with a specific focus on students' rights, and also a national forum of student councils that give them a decisional role instead of then only a consultative role, and a new regulation of the forum of the student associations, a forum that's made up by the biggest student organizations in Italy, that as for right now is rarely summoned, and those few times that it is, there isn't any agenda, so it's very hard for us to use it to make proposals. And after all of this work, we luckily started to see some victories. In many schools, we managed to obtain alias careers, menstrual leave, gender neutral bathrooms, sex education, and many more things like this. We managed to obtain regional conferences to discuss the topic of the right to education in all of its aspects, from the cost of going to school, transportation, school abandonment, dropouts, and students' well-being in general. And in some cases, we managed to create or update the original laws on right to education. And for last, we managed to obtain things like a monitoring and observers on the quality of school buildings and on the paths that should lead to a first approach to work that before that weren't regulated and cause the death of 3 students in less than a year. Thank you very much for your time and attention. It was a pleasure to speak and explain this campaign, and clearly it doesn't stop here, and that's why today here in Rome, our National Assembly, It's Not Utopia, will begin. Basically 3 days made to prove that all of our demands are realizable, but that can actually be integrated in the school system and improve it. And tomorrow we will also launch our petition on our main requests inside Possiamo Tutto, hoping that they will finally reach our desired audience and the world of politics. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Niamh. And Corinne, for this amazing presentation of all of your work. I have a few comments. Well, I will not give them all now. I will also open the floor for questions shortly. So for those of you who are attending, if you have any questions, don't forget to post them in the Q&A, in the chat, or even raise your hand to speak. I just, before we do that, you can get your little wheels turning while I comment on, first of all, Niamh's presentation. That for me really was lovely to see the photos and the videos of the students. I think sometimes, especially for people who maybe work more at the European level, we hear about the numbers, we hear about the mobilizations, but seeing videos, seeing photos and footage, and also seeing, highlighted the achievements of the campaign, I think for me were the main takeaways from your intervention. When it comes to Corinne's sort of overview of the research, I had a comment actually on what you mentioned about VET and the difference between VET and general secondary education. This is something that is also reflected. It also sort of spills down to the European level, where we currently have VET treated as a different priority from general secondary education. So they're competences of 2 different directorate generals. And one of our OBESU's main advocacy point towards the next EP elections of 2024 is actually to have a unified lifelong learning commissioner, because we think that, of course, VET students are workers in training in a way, but they are also most of all students, and they need to be protected and they need to have the same rights as students of general secondary. And so this is really something that does not happen apparently only at European level, but it's something that also is reflected in sort of the policy setup at European level. There's also this issue of the gap between formal and informal participation. The fact that you mentioned so many young people are in schools, so students are engaged informally, going demonstration, signing petition, joining strikes. And I think that the work that UDS is doing, Unione degli Studenti is doing to sort of bring again those 2 sides together is very important, because there are some things that can only be achieved through formal structures of participation. And I'm not only thinking about those of the school, but also those of our national contexts, like our democracies. The health of our democracies depends not only on people voting, but people engaging with the more formal side of politics. For that, education is needed. Education is needed that can sort of bridge this gap that is perceived between what politicians do, what decisions they take in office, and the reality that students live every day. So I think for me, this was definitely very, very interesting. So thank you so much. I would maybe kick off with my own question, since I don't see that many for the moment. It's a bit of a practical question, and it pertains really tools and activities. So seeing your experience in the Possiamo Tutto campaign, what sort of tools, what sort of activities do you see really existing within a school, for example, to raise awareness among teachers and to involve students in decision-making processes?
Well, I will answer this one. Many of the instruments that we are seeing right now that create participation are students' collectives that are typical of one school. They're not like our organization that focuses more on a territorial level, so on cities or regions, but they are collectives that are made up by students of one school that try to target the issues that they are facing, maybe on structural problems with buildings, or sometimes they just try and organize different type of social activities than the ones that usually the school gives. And in many schools, this is the first and best approach to participation. Also, something as simple as school journals also are a great approach, and these are some of the things that we consider the basics to democratic participation.
And if I may add, regarding maybe more the adult target, because as I also shared in my presentation, there is actually an issue with, let's call it paternalism. So adults not really convinced that youth know the way around things. I think that it is very, very important to work also with the adult component of the school. And obviously, I bring this perspective as Action Aid. It's not maybe UDS's main focus, but I think this is very important to work with them also with active and participatory methodologies to try to deconstruct all the stereotypes that they have with respect to the students, so that we can actually create an enabling context, an enabling environment for students to participate, and maybe also for teachers to participate more and reclaim the rights, because there are also issues actually affecting teachers within the school organization. But yeah, as I was saying, definitely teacher training, and to do it with active and participatory methodologies, so that they can also experiment what it means to actually participate, not to arrive with the huge conference just to share data. That's something definitely important, but also like to put the hands in the concrete work, and try really also to empower teachers to become allies of their students. Thank you.
Thank you both. I think especially this last point you mentioned, Corinne, is a bit of the essence of this, our ELNE community, the idea that stakeholders in education also need to work together at all levels, and the school level is a crucial one. And definitely agreed on sort of the attitudes sometimes that are a bit, well, that need to be, say, that come from a prejudice that needs to be deconstructed and sort of needs to go a little bit on and needs to be disproved by the reality of student ownership. We have a question from Kiran, I think. I hope this is how the name is pronounced. Kieran says, our project enables democratic activation of youth, is building youth-led civic agendas for change into under-resourced municipalities. Are there any contacts with Naples or Campania-based contributors to this great research and activities under Possiamo Tutto? I'm also going to post it in the chat. Maybe it would be slightly easier for you to, well, not sure with the way it reads, but
maybe I can start on this one, and then I leave it also to Niamh if you have something to add. So the research is actually national, so it does not have geographic focus in a strict sense, so that we have separately analyzed all the different regions. What we have tried to analyze is the difference between north, center, and south. but it may be quite broad. But I think that definitely there is a contribution also from Campania and from this region, because, for example, I know that some students from the region have participated in our focus groups, but we don't have any specific data if this is what you're asking for. But I will also leave it to Niamh if you have something to add. And I have seen also there is another comment in the chat on the survey, and I will now share a link with you where you can access it. Unfortunately, it is just in Italian, so sorry for those who are not Italian speakers, but I will look for the link and send it in the chat. Thanks.
Yes, as for the previous question, as Corinne said, they didn't analyze the data regionally, but there are actually many activities under Possiamo Tutto, because it is a campaign that is focused on students' participation, and by having many contacts in Campania and also in Naples, there are many activities that focus on the points of our campaign. Also, there was a strike this morning in Naples, where one of the points was the BTC, the educational centers, vocational educational centers. So I can answer that. Yes, there are many activities regarding the campaign in Campania.
Fantastic. And I'm sure that there is maybe a regional section or even a city sort of based sections in Campania as well, Niamh, that you know, if Kiran needs or wants to find a way to contact, it shouldn't be too difficult to do so through UDS, maybe, hopefully. I see a nod. It's a yes. Okay, we also have another question, which is, I'd like to ask how politics at national level answer to the campaigns of Possiamo Tutto. And I think this is going to be our last question for the day before wrapping up. So Niamh and Corinne, the floor is yours.
Should I go, maybe? So how did they answer? Well, the majority, so those who are actually governing the country, did never really answer to many of our requests, to our letters. So there is, let's say, a gap, a communication gap. Let's put it like this. We have had some contacts with representatives from the opposition. There have been some sort of openings, but we need to see if this will have, let's say, a concrete output in an actual reform and in supporting an actual reform for how we see it, because another issue is that we do not just want a reform, we want a certain type of reform. So the games are opened right now, let's say. But maybe what we can definitely affirm is that, but this is maybe in general a problem in Italy. It's not just about our campaign. There is a disalignment between who governs the country and who actually lives in it. So we don't have we have not gotten many responses or also promises from that point of view, but we will definitely keep fighting and keep marching on the streets and doing assemblies until we reach our goal. But I will also leave it to Niamh if you want to add something on that. Quite a difficult question, I have to say.
Definitely, knowing the political situation in Italy, we didn't have all of these high expectations on an immediate response from the world of politics, but we are okay with that. We knew we would have to fight a little more for it, but we're already starting to see at least some small changes. because the Forum of Students Associations that I talked about earlier was met up a week ago, and the Minister of Education told us that he would try to summon it every month like it should be. We are hoping that that this will happen so that we will be able to bring most of the points in our campaign in at least that space. But as for right now, we can't be sure if this promise will be maintained.
Thank you, Niamh. Indeed, not maybe the most, let's say, positive looking road ahead, but there's two considerations I think I would like to make here before giving the floor back to Valentina. The first is that rights are not given, they are fought for. And so this is also, I think, the lesson, and already seeing, I don't know, students in their councils fighting and managing to introduce menstrual leave in school. These small, apparently small small victories, they do change, I think, the landscape over time, because let us not forget, and especially for us working on policy at European level, that change needs time. And as much as we want everything and we want it now, the reality of this is that often it takes a little bit for things to move. So I hope that in the following years we will see more sort of more victories, and indeed already the you know, the news about forums, the fast being invited more often to decision-making tables is a good news. I think for me, this is all. I would like to thank you all so much for coming. Niamh and Corinne, thank you for lending us your time and your expertise and teaching us all a little bit more about how it looks in Italian schools for students fighting for their rights. Valentina, back to you.
Thank you so much. Honestly, as I am still a student myself, I found this very inspiring and interesting. So thank you to the speakers, and also thank you to Gilda for organizing this. And I just want to say quickly that you can join us on our very last webinar of the week, which will be on empowering school boards, and it's organized by the European Parents Association. And with that, I will leave you now. But thank you very much to everyone for joining us today. Thank you.